My mother once told me she'd never be proud of me. I laughed it off, but when strangers started praising what I built, her silence cut deeper than any insult ever could. Hi everyone, my name's James, and honestly, I never pictured myself as the type of person who'd end up writing one of these posts. For years I'd scroll through stories on here, shaking my head at how heartless or entitled families could be. I always thought, that can't be real, not to that extreme. But now? After everything that's happened with my own family, I get it. Sometimes the people closest to you can treat you worse than strangers. Let me back up. I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've had one dream. Not a side hustle. Not just a little kitchen hobby. A real bakery. A place where you could step inside and be hit with that warm wave of fresh bread straight out of the oven. A place where people could look through glass cases filled with golden pastries and frosted cakes, and feel like they just walked into something comforting, something alive. I spent years working long hours, saving every dollar, and learning from kind-hearted local bakers who'd slip me tips and tricks when they saw how serious I was. But my family? Let's just say, supportive has never been their language. I'm the youngest of 3. My brother Ezra, he's 31, is basically their golden child. He works in finance, wears expensive suits, and has that slick way of talking that makes people nod along, even when he's stretching the truth. My sister Clara, she's 29, and she's quieter, but firmly in Ezra's corner. If Ezra says the sky is green, she'll nod like it's gospel. Then there's me, the one with silly hobbies. When I was a kid, I begged to bake instead of going to soccer practice. My dad would sigh, like I'd just confessed to wanting to be an astronaut clown. He'd say, James, not everything in life is about fun. You need to think about stability. My mom wasn't as harsh, but her little digs stung just the same. That's cute, she'd say, but you'll outgrow it. Spoiler alert, I never did. Fast forward to this year. After years of saving and planning, I finally signed a lease for a small corner shop downtown. It used to be a flower shop, so the layout had this cozy charm with giant windows that just begged for sunlight. I poured everything I had into that place. Fresh paint on the walls, shiny new ovens, every penny I could scrape together going into equipment and decor. I even designed my own logo. The name? Morning Rise. Simple, but to me, it felt perfect. When I sent out invitations for the grand opening, my hands were literally shaking. I wanted everything flawless. I tested recipes over and over. I arranged the seating so people would feel at home. I even hand-painted little wooden signs for every pastry, like something out of a storybook cafe. Deep down, though, what I wanted most wasn't just a crowd of strangers. I wanted my family there. After years of being brushed off, some tiny part of me still whispered, maybe this time they'll be proud. Maybe they'll finally see me. The night before the opening, I sent a reminder in the family group chat. Ezra, as usual, ignored me. Clara replied with nothing but a thumbs-up emoji. My parents? 2 words, we'll see. Those words have been the soundtrack of my life. Never a real yes, never commitment, just lukewarm half-promises. Still, I told myself not to spiral. The morning of the opening, I was up at 4 a.m., covered in flour before the sun even thought about rising. By 7, the air in my shop smelled heavenly, cinnamon rolls, buttery croissants, crusty sourdough loaves cooling on the rack. I even baked a special cake, just in case my family actually showed. At 8 a.m., the first customers trickled in. By noon, there was a steady crowd. Strangers complimented the atmosphere, told me the pastries tasted like home. A couple even asked if I was hiring. I should have been floating on cloud 9, but my eyes kept darting to the door. Every time that little bell rang, my heart jumped. Maybe mom and dad. Maybe Ezra. Maybe Clara. But hour after hour, nothing. Not a single familiar face. By late afternoon, the rush slowed. I finally checked my phone, and that's when I saw it. A photo in the family group chat. Ezra, standing on a stage, holding up some framed certificate. My entire family was around him, beaming like they just won the lottery. Turns out, Ezra had been promoted, senior regional manager, or something equally glossy. The caption from my mom read, "So proud of you, Ezra. You've made us all so happy today." I can't explain the punch I felt in my chest. I was sitting in the middle of my own bakery, surrounded by the smell of bread I'd baked with my own hands, something I'd built from absolutely nothing. And they hadn't even bothered to tell me they wouldn't come. No, sorry, no, we'll make it next time. Just silence. And then that picture, like salt in an open wound. That night, I locked up alone. The lights dimmed, the chairs stacked, my body aching from exhaustion but my heart, hollow. As I turned the key in the door, my phone buzzed again. For one split second, I thought maybe, it was an apology. Some kind of explanation. But no. It was a message from my dad. James, we need to discuss the bakery. Call me when you can. When that text from dad lit up my phone, James, we need to discuss the bakery, I just stood there staring at it, like the screen itself was mocking me. The timing? Couldn't have been worse. I'd just finished 12 hours on my feet, covered in flour and sugar, plastering on a smile for strangers while the one corner I wanted filled, the family table, sat empty all day. And now my father suddenly wanted to discuss my dream? A part of me wanted to ignore it, shove the phone in my apron and pretend I never saw it. But another part, the same part that's always been starving for their approval, whispered, maybe this is it. Maybe he's reaching out. Maybe he finally sees what I've done. I didn't call back right away. Instead, I moved through the motions like a ghost. Wiped counters that already shined. Stacked chairs no one from my family had touched. Wrapped up the special cake I'd baked just for them, untouched and still perfect. The bakery still smelled of vanilla and butter, but for me, it felt cold, empty. Walking home, that family photo replayed in my head like a cruel slideshow. Ezra on stage, teeth flashing in that smug grin. Mom's hand proudly resting on his shoulder. Dad looking like his son had just cured cancer. Clara, smiling wider than I'd seen her in years. They looked united, glowing. And me? I was invisible. When I finally sat down on my bed that night, I typed reply after reply. Sure, what's up? Delete. I had a great opening today. Delete. My chest ached as I realized I couldn't even bring myself to tell him that. In the end, I settled on a single word, okay. His response came within 60 seconds. Tomorrow evening. Come by the house. That was it. No congratulations. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a summons, like I was an employee being called into his office. The next day dragged like wet cement. I opened shop again, and thank God, customers came. A few even returned, smiling, telling me they loved the bread. That sparked something in me, hope. Maybe this could really work. But the thought of that evening weighed heavy in my chest all day. By the time I parked outside my parents' house, my stomach was tied in knots. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. Same dark brick walls. Same trimmed hedges. Same squeaky iron gate that slammed behind me. It was like walking back into childhood, where every step up that stone path meant bracing for one of Dad's serious talks. Mom opened the door. Her voice was polite, her smile thin. James, you're here. No hug. No, how's the bakery? Just a tone that made me feel like an uninvited guest. Inside, the scene was just as predictable. Clara sat at the table, scrolling endlessly on her phone. Ezra was stretched out in Dad's favorite chair, one leg crossed, smirking like he owned the place. When his eyes landed on me, he didn't miss a beat. Well, if it isn't the man of the hour. How's life in the cupcake business? Every muscle in my jaw screamed to snap back, but I swallowed it. If I gave him anything, he'd use it to twist the knife. I sat at the table instead, straight across from him. A moment later, Dad walked in carrying a thick stack of papers. No hello, no small talk. He sat down, laid them out like evidence, and folded his hands. James, he said, pausing in that way that makes you feel like you've already done something wrong. Your mother and I think it's time we had an honest discussion about your bakery. The way he said it. Like bakery was some dirty word. Like it belonged in the same category as gambling or drinking. My stomach twisted. All right, I said carefully. What about it? He adjusted his glasses and slid one sheet across the table. An article printout, the headline bold, most small businesses fail within the first 5 years. He tapped it with his finger. Look here. Statistics don't lie. You've put yourself in a very risky situation, and frankly, we're concerned about the financial implications. You need to be realistic. I blinked at him, stunned. This was the first thing he had to say about my bakery? No mention of the opening. No acknowledgement of the months of sweat, the crowds who showed up, the compliments. Just doom and statistics. Ezra chuckled, leaning back like he was watching a comedy. He's right, you know. Cute that you want to play shopkeeper, but Dad's giving you solid advice. You should listen. My blood boiled so hot I thought my face would flush crimson, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. I'm not playing shopkeeper. I had a great turnout yesterday. People love the food. This is something I built from the ground up. Mom sighed like I was a child refusing to eat my vegetables. We're not saying you haven't worked hard, James. But Ezra's promotion shows what stability looks like. That's a real career path. We don't want you to throw away your future chasing a hobby. That word, hobby, hit me like a slap across the face. After everything, after years of saving, planning, sacrificing, they still saw it as a phase. Clara finally spoke, not even looking up from her phone. Maybe if you listened to them, you wouldn't end up broke. Just saying. I looked at each of them, Dad with his papers, Mom with her sigh, Clara tapping her screen, Ezra smirking like the devil himself. Rage and hurt tangled in my chest. Finally, I turned back to Dad. So why am I here? What exactly do you want to discuss? That's when he dropped it. The bomb. We think it would be wise if you let Ezra oversee the financial side of your bakery, Dad said, firm and final. He has experience with money. He could make sure you don't get in over your head. It would give us peace of mind. For a split second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. My dad's words just hung in the air, and I stared at him, then at Ezra, who was smirking like a cat that had already cornered its prey. You want Ezra to run my bakery? I asked slowly, carefully, like I was trying to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Not run it, Dad said quickly, holding up a hand. Just manage the important parts. The finances, the planning, the areas you're not really equipped to handle. You'd still bake, of course. Of course. Like the baking, the heart, the soul, the literal foundation of my dream, was just some side activity, a child's plaything. Ezra leaned forward, teeth flashing in that smug grin of his. Think of it this way, James, he said, voice dripping with condescension. You do the fun part, kneading dough, frosting cupcakes. I'll take care of the grown-up stuff. That way, everyone wins. Everyone except me. I sat there, my hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. My own family, who hadn't even shown up on the most important day of my life, was now telling me I wasn't capable of running the very thing I'd built with my own 2 hands. And worse? They wanted Ezra, the golden boy, their chosen one, to swoop in and save me from myself. I looked at the stack of papers Dad had slid across the table. I looked at Ezra's grin, growing wider with every second I stayed silent. My mind was spinning, screaming at me to say something, to fight. But the weight of their expectations, that same crushing weight I'd carried since childhood, pressed down harder and harder. Finally, I drew in a slow breath. "I don't think that's necessary," I said, voice low but steady. "I've managed the finances myself. I have a business plan. I've done the research. I saved for emergencies. I don't need Ezra overseeing anything." Dad's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing behind those familiar glasses. It was the same look he gave me when I dared to push back as a kid. "James," he said sternly, "we're only looking out for you. This isn't about control. It's about guidance. Ezra has a proven track record. You're passionate about baking, but passion doesn't keep the lights on." Ezra leaned back casually, crossing his arms like a smug king watching a subject misbehave. "Look, little brother. I'm just offering help. You don't have to take it. But don't say I didn't try. I know what it takes to make money. Honestly, I'm not sure you do." My chest tightened. It was the same script I'd heard all my life, Ezra talking down, Dad painting it as concern, Mom silently backing them, Clara nodding along. Even now, after I'd proven I could bring people in, after I'd poured years into this dream, they still wanted me shoved back into their box. I gripped the edge of the table. "Do you even understand what you're saying? I didn't just open this bakery on a whim. I built it. I invested the money, the sleepless nights, every ounce of myself. This isn't a hobby. This is my life." Mom sighed, long and weary, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "James, we understand you've worked hard. But life isn't fair. You can't expect everything to work out just because you tried. Ezra is offering practical help. That's all." Ezra tilted his head, his grin sharpening. "Practical help?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You mean taking over the very parts I've already been handling? So you can claim credit if it succeeds, while I just bake cupcakes?" Ezra chuckled, that light, fake laugh he used when he wanted to cut someone down without looking cruel. "You're making it sound so dramatic. I'm not stealing anything. I'm just trying to help. You don't need to get so defensive." The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick. My pulse pounded in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to flip the table, to tear those papers in half, to finally unleash everything I'd held back. But I couldn't, not yet. I forced my voice calm, though it trembled with fury. "I've already launched the bakery, Ezra. Customers came. They bought the bread. Some came back the next day. Do you know what that means? It means I can do this without you, or anyone, telling me how." Dad frowned, deep lines cutting into his face. Mom's eyes flashed with irritation. "James, you're letting your pride get in the way. You've never been practical. You've never been one to make good decisions without guidance." Something in me snapped. Years of their dismissal, their sighs, their silence, everything hit me at once. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, my voice sharp and deliberate. "Do you know why no one came to my grand opening yesterday?" I asked, staring at each of them in turn. "Because you were too busy celebrating Ezra's promotion. Not one of you bothered to tell me. You left me standing in that bakery alone. Do you understand how that feels?" The room went quiet. Clara finally lowered her phone, her expression flickering, guilt, or maybe just annoyance. Ezra shrugged. Dad cleared his throat. Mom's voice came out flat. "It was a scheduling conflict." "A conflict?" I repeated, my voice cracking with disbelief. "You chose Ezra over me. You left me out. And now you want me to let him take over the very thing I built?" Ezra leaned forward this time, eyes glittering. "I think you're exaggerating. You've done well, James, but don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. That's dangerous in business." And suddenly, I felt calm. Cold. Like ice had flooded through my veins. I lifted the papers, glanced at them, then met each of their eyes. "You're not helping," I said, steady and sharp. "You're trying to control me. You want to take credit for something you never believed in. Well, you can keep your guidance. I don't need it. Not from any of you." Dad's face darkened. Mom's lips pressed thin. Clara muttered under her breath, "He's being ridiculous." And Ezra, his smirk faltered. Just for a second, surprise cracked through. Then Dad leaned back, pinched the bridge of his nose, and spoke in that low, dangerous tone I'd heard all my life. "James, you're going to regret this. You think you're ready to run a business. You think you can handle everything on your own. But you're young, naive, stubborn. You don't realize how much you're risking. We were only trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I cut in, my voice ice cold. "No. You were protecting yourselves. Making sure Ezra stays the star, making sure I stay small. That's not protection. That's manipulation." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Even Clara blinked, shocked. Mom's jaw clenched. Ezra's eyes narrowed. And then, Dad's hand slammed down on the table with a crack. "That's enough, James. You'll see soon enough. You can't do this alone. And when you fail..." I shot to my feet, the chair screeching against the floor. My voice thundered back. "I won't fail. And when I succeed, it'll be because I believed in myself when none of you did. Not because of Ezra. Not because of any of you." Ezra gave a short, hollow laugh. "We'll see about that." And in that moment, I felt something raw, terrifying, but electrifying. I was done. Done playing their game. Done shrinking. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I swore to myself, I would prove them wrong. And not just a little. I'd make them wish they'd never underestimated me. But before I could even start planning what that looked like, Mom's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her face shifting into something almost smug. "You might want to see this," she said, sliding it across the table. I hesitated, then took it. My stomach dropped. On the screen was a post from a local business blog I hadn't even known covered openings. There it was, Morning Rise, my bakery. Packed. Customers lined up outside. proof of everything I'd done. But then, the comments. At the very top, one line stood out like a knife to the chest. Looks like someone's trying to compete with Ezra's franchise. Hope they know what they're doing. And that's when it hit me like ice water down my spine. My family wasn't finished with me yet. Not even close. I stared at that comment on the blog post, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from something sharper. A sudden, burning clarity. It wasn't just the words on the screen. It was Ezra's smirk still fresh in my mind, Dad's condescending tone echoing in my ears, Mom's we know what's best attitude. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had expected me to fold. To crumble. To accept my place in their little hierarchy where Ezra shined and I stayed in the shadows. But that night, something in me shifted. I set the phone down and looked around the table. My whole family was watching me, waiting, hoping, to see me cave like I always had. But I didn't. Not this time. I drew in a long breath and felt something strange wash over me. Calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't desperate for their respect. I wasn't begging for approval. I was planning my next move. You know what? I said, letting the words roll out slow and deliberate, like stones dropping into water. I don't need your help. I don't need your guidance. And I sure as hell don't need Ezra trying to take over what I built. So here's what's going to happen, I'm going to make this bakery succeed on my own. And when I do, you'll see just how wrong you've been. Ezra leaned back, and for just a flicker of a second, I saw it, concern. Quickly masked by that smug grin. Bold words, he said smoothly. But bold words don't pay the bills, James. Numbers do. That's why I'm offering my help. I let out a laugh. At first quiet, then sharper, louder. Numbers? Let me tell you something about numbers, Ezra. They only matter if you have the guts to take the first step. And I already did. You've just been sitting on your throne, pretending to care while pulling strings. Mom's face flushed crimson, but she stayed silent. She always does when the control starts slipping. Dad's hands tightened into fists on the table. And Clara, the eternal shadow to Ezra's spotlight, even she hesitated, her phone slipping from her fingers for a beat. That's when I knew I had them rattled. That night, back in my apartment, I paced the floor like a man possessed. They thought they could muscle into my business, claim control, save me from myself. They had no clue how careful I'd been, how many details I'd guarded. Every recipe, every receipt, every record, it was mine. They had no leverage. But I wanted more than leverage. I wanted a statement. Something they couldn't twist. So I started planning. First, I documented everything. Photos from the grand opening, receipts, customer feedback, screenshots of reviews. Even that blog post and its comment thread. I wanted proof. Then I turned to the very thing they'd always used against me, money. My parents' favorite narrative was that I was irresponsible, reckless, not financially minded. If I could prove them wrong in the most public way possible, it would sting in a way they couldn't spin. The next morning, I walked into morning rise with fire in my veins. The place was spotless. The pastries perfect. The coffee steaming hot. But this time, I wasn't just baking for customers, I was baking with purpose. Every cinnamon roll, every crusty loaf of bread, every delicate croissant was more than food. It was proof. It was defiance. And then I started reaching out. Local cafes, small catering companies, community centers. I sent samples. I extended invitations. I wasn't networking, I was weaving a net so strong my family couldn't pretend I didn't exist. By late afternoon, I had 3 cafes eager to carry my pastries and a catering business interested in desserts for their events. Real contracts. Real numbers. Meanwhile, in the family group chat, Ezra posted yet another smug work update. Mom flooded it with heart emojis. Clara threw in a thumbs up. I said nothing. Not yet. Patience, I told myself. Patience is part of the plan. That evening, another text buzzed through. From Dad. We're disappointed, James. We think you're making a mistake. Call us. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled. Not the broken kind of smile I used to fake for their approval, but something different. This time, I didn't reply. Not until I was ready. The next week blurred into one long stretch of flour, sugar, and caffeine. I lived inside that bakery, testing recipes, perfecting details, shaking hands, forging partnerships. Each compliment, each repeat customer, each order was another brick in the wall of confidence I'd been missing my whole life. And then, the opportunity landed in my lap. A local food magazine reached out. They wanted to feature Morning Rise in their upcoming issue, highlighting new businesses that had opened despite the odds. Not just a little blurb. A full feature, online and in print. Exposure that would reach tens of thousands, maybe more. I hung up with the editor, and a shiver of excitement ran down my spine. This was it. This was the stage. My chance to not just tell my story, but to make them choke on it. For days, I prepared obsessively. Scrubbing every inch of the shop, rehearsing my words, lining up pastries so perfect they looked unreal. I even made a centerpiece cake, elegant and glossy, ready to be photographed. But the morning of the shoot, my stomach sank. Because there, striding down the street like he owned it, was Ezra. Crisp suit, polished shoes, that permanent air of self-importance. My jaw clenched. He'd somehow found out. He reached for the bakery door, but I blocked him. Politely. Firmly. This is a private meeting, I said. It's already scheduled. He raised an eyebrow, lips curling like he couldn't believe I was daring to shut him out. But to my surprise, he didn't make a scene. He turned and walked away. Not defeated, but watching. Always watching. And then the editor arrived. The shoot was flawless. I showed them the process, the ingredients, the heart I put into every single item. They asked questions. They snapped photos. They even posted live updates on their social media. By the end of the day, my bakery wasn't just busy, it was trending. That evening, I checked the family group chat. Predictably, Ezra had already posted one of his daily humblebrag photos from work. A shiny desk, a fancy watch, a caption that screamed, "Look at me, I'm important." But not a single mention of morning rise. No congratulations, no acknowledgement that their youngest had just made waves in the community. Mom and Dad stayed silent. Clara, as usual, dropped her default thumbs up emoji and nothing else. But then, something unexpected. A comment from one of my mother's acquaintances, a woman who clearly followed the local business scene. Her words cut right through the silence. "James, your bakery is getting a lot of attention. Looks like you're really onto something." I could practically feel the tension ripple through the group chat. They saw it. Oh, they saw it. And now, for the first time, other people were noticing me, and they couldn't spin it. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. The first move had been made, and it was mine. Later that night, while I was locking up the bakery, my phone buzzed again. "Dad." The text was short, clipped, commanding, "James. We need to talk. Urgent. Call now." I stared at the message. I knew exactly what was coming. They weren't done trying to control me. I could already picture the guilt-tripping, the "we're just worried about you" lines, the endless attempts to shove Ezra into the spotlight. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I set the phone down on the counter, inhaled the buttery scent of croissants still lingering in the air, and smiled. The next morning, I was up early, sharper than ever. The bakery was still buzzing online, and the magazine feature was set to drop that week. I had a clear mission: turn the tables in a way they couldn't twist, couldn't hijack for Ezra, couldn't ignore. I doubled down on community ties. I met with cafe owners, small restaurant managers, event coordinators, anyone willing to taste my work. By midweek, I had contracts inked, my pastries in 3 cafes, a deli, and even my first wedding catering gig. Every deal, every email, every signature, I documented carefully. Photos, screenshots, paper trails. This wasn't just business. This was ammunition. Meanwhile, my family carried on with their usual act. Ezra posted another update, something about a bonus at work. Mom chimed in with glowing praise, and Clara dropped yet another emoji. Still no acknowledgement of morning rise. No shock there. For years, the only achievements they recognized were ones they could twist into proof that I wasn't practical enough, while Ezra was the golden standard. Then the magazine feature went live. It was more than I dreamed of, an entire spread with glossy photos of the bakery, shots of the pastries, even a little piece about my journey. The headline read, "Morning Rise, a dream baked into reality." The comments section exploded. Customers tagged friends, shared the link, wrote about their favorite pastries. It wasn't just buzz, it was validation, loud and undeniable. I knew exactly what I had to do. I dropped the link into the family group chat with a short, sharp message: "The bakery is officially featured in the local magazine. Feel free to check it out." I didn't stick around waiting for applause. I just watched. The little notification bubbles popped up one by one. Dad first. His reply was stiff, almost angry. "James, this isn't a game. You need to let Ezra help before you make a mistake." Then Mom, "We're worried about your decisions. You're risking too much." Clara, "I don't know why you insist on doing this alone. Just, be careful." And finally Ezra, smug even through text, "You might have had some luck, but we'll see if it lasts. Don't overestimate yourself." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The proof was already out there for the whole town to see. That weekend, I hosted a community tasting event at Morning Rise. I invited the cafe owners, the neighbors, the magazine contacts. By noon, the bakery was overflowing. The air buzzed with chatter, the smell of fresh bread wrapping around the room, camera flashes sparking as people posted photos. For the first time, I looked around and saw reflected in their faces what I'd always dreamed of: respect, admiration, excitement. And right on cue, my family showed up. They weren't invited. But there they were, stepping through the door like tourists in foreign territory. Ezra with his trademark smirk, clearly expecting mediocrity. Dad looking cautious, Mom with her tight, practiced smile, and Clara hovering like she wasn't sure if she should be impressed or annoyed. I greeted them politely, my tone cool but controlled. "Welcome," I said. "Feel free to look around." Ezra scanned the room, his eyes darting from the packed tables to the line stretching outside. His smirk faltered. This is a lot," he muttered under his breath. Dad cleared his throat, visibly uneasy. "James, we didn't realize." I cut him off, calm but sharp. "No. You knew exactly what this would look like. You just didn't believe I could make it happen." Mom's jaw tightened. Clara shifted uncomfortably. And Ezra, for the first time, looked off balance. I led them to the display case, where rows of pastries gleamed under the lights. I pointed out the pending orders, the contracts, the feature framed proudly near the register. "All of this happened while you ignored me. While you chose Ezra. And I did it without any of you." Ezra's mouth opened, ready to fire back, but he never got the chance. A woman approached, one of my regulars, who had waited outside for nearly an hour just to get in. She glanced at Ezra and Dad. "Excuse me," she said politely, "are you with the bakery?" Ezra froze, caught off guard. No, we're just visiting." The woman smiled and shook her head. "Well, you should be proud of him. This place is amazing. Honestly, I thought maybe you were the owners, but clearly James is the one running things." The words hit like a thunderclap. I watched Ezra's face pale, Dad shift uncomfortably, Mom's tight smile crack, Clara glance away. I inhaled slowly, letting the satisfaction sink deep into my bones. Then, leaning close enough so only they could hear, I whispered. This is my success. Not Ezra's. Not yours. Mine. And it's not because I needed your approval. It's because I never did. The family lingered for a few minutes longer, standing off to the side as if they were strangers in my world. They watched me move through the bakery, greeting customers, sliding trays of pastries into boxes, explaining ingredients, answering questions with ease. Every smile I exchanged with a customer, every compliment I received, it was a reminder. A reminder that I had built something real. Something they couldn't dismiss. Something they couldn't touch. And then, just as quietly as they came, they left. No hug. No handshake. Not a single word of congratulations. Not even the bare minimum of acknowledgement. They didn't even meet my eyes on the way out the door. But for once, I didn't care. I didn't need it. Because I had already proven my point. I hadn't just survived their neglect. I had thrived in spite of it. Morning Rise was alive. The magazine feature had blown the doors wide open, the community was rallying around me, and new contracts were stacking up faster than I could bake. I had built this from nothing, and it was mine. That night, when I finally locked up, my body ached with exhaustion, but my heart was light. I pulled out my phone. No new messages. No half-hearted apologies. No fake words of pride. Just silence. And that silence said it all. For the first time, I realized I didn't need them. Not their validation. Not their approval. Not their permission. I had everything I had wanted all along, a business that was thriving, respect from people who actually saw me, and the satisfaction of proving every single one of them wrong. Ezra could stew in his bitterness. Mom and Dad could cling to their obsession with control. Clara could keep wondering why I refused to let them in. None of it mattered anymore. It was too late. I poured myself a cup of coffee in the quiet of my apartment, leaned back in my chair, and smiled. Morning Rise wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a victory. A triumph I had earned with my own hands. And this time? No one. Not Ezra. Not my parents. Not anyone was going to take it from me. I didn't forgive them. I didn't soften. I just moved forward, stronger, smarter, and more determined than I had ever been. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged in my own story. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Thanks for watching. If you connected with this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are more stories like this on the way.